We're going to get into some nitty and some gritty about Fiverr today, specifically about audiobook gigs, because they're a little bit different than a typical voiceover gig, largely because of the pricing, right? As we know, audiobooks are priced per finished hour, not quite by the word, which is how we price our voiceover gigs. So I'm going to show you how my gig is formatted, and then how I suggest those of you that are newer format your audiobook gig for Fiverr. If you haven't even created a profile on Fiverr, or have yet to create a profile on Fiverr, I always tell people to, before you do that, if you haven't, before you create the profile, think about the name that you're going to go by. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, because that's the only thing that you can't change. You can't change your username at all on Fiverr. So think about the one that you're going to use, and make sure that it's the same name that you're going to use across all of your profiles, and including your website, because there have been instances over the last 8 or so years, that 8 or 9 years that I've been on Fiverr now, that people have Googled me, Googled my username, and found my website because they are the same. So, food for thought. Anywho, so what do we got for the poll? Okay, what type of gigs on Fiverr do you offer? So, looks like 28% of you said audiobooks only. None of you said commercial VO, but 31% of you said a mix of services, and I recommend that you do. Even if it's not voiceover or audiobook related, when you first start out on Fiverr, you're starting with 4 gigs, and they don't all have to be voiceover related. You could have a couple of voiceover gigs, one that we refer to as like an umbrella gig or a main gig, which is a little bit of everything, voiceover, and then perhaps maybe a phone greeting or an IVR gig, an audiobook gig if you offer audiobook production services, and then you could save that last gig for something else that you know really, really well. That doesn't have to be voiceover or audiobook related. It could be perhaps you're really good with Excel spreadsheets or something. You could offer that service on Fiverr too, just to keep traffic coming into your profile, because any kind of traffic to your profile inherently boosts all your other gigs too. So you definitely want that, especially if it's something that requires repeat business. Awesome. Example. So for me, I have a few voiceover gigs, an audiobook gig, and then I have a podcast editing gig, which gets a lot of traffic because, as you can imagine, there are, podcasters will publish once a week, once a month. Some of them buy, many in advance. Some of them buy once a week, a couple times a month. But that traffic generates I should say it boosts my algorithm, therefore enhancing or boosting all the rest of the gigs within my profile. So it definitely helps. And when it comes down to Fiverr, if you can't tell already, it's just mainly understanding how it works, understanding how the algorithm works, and then catering to that algorithm. But we're getting a little off topic here. 41% of you said I haven't started yet, so good. So I'm hoping that something said today will help you in which direction that you go. So I'm going to show you my gig and then give you some tips really quick, and then we'll get to the comments. So if you have a question specifically about Fiverr, please ask. I'm also an official Fiverr trainer, so please ask. I can answer your question to the best of my ability. All right, so let's take this off. Let's go over to my gig. This is my audiobook gig. Let me pull it up here so I can see it. As you can tell, I have my audiobook gig in the voiceover category. I know a lot of you have started with Fiverr and then have come to see that there is a voiceover category and then there's an audiobook production category. I don't recommend audiobooks, audiobook production, a full production, to be in the audiobook category, because that category, if you haven't seen it already, is better suited for like post production. It's better suited for editing, mastering, proofing, that sort of thing. Voiceover is sort of an afterthought, the way that it's set up. So it doesn't quite work for full production of audiobooks. And I've always found that my audiobook gig does better in the voiceover category, and I've tested it in both a couple of times, and it's always done better in the voiceover category. All right, looking at my pricing, my entry point is $30, and then the number of words that covers for the base gig is 150. Now, the whole ideology behind the pricing structure for your audiobook gig is that you want the total number of words in this box for 9,300 words to equal your per finished hour rate. Because, as we know, a finished hour is roughly 9,300 words. So my per finished hour rate is $250, which is industry standard. So when you're creating your gig, before we get into pricing, I want to bring your attention to the keywords that we want to use. Now, when you're choosing a gig title, it pre-fills the I will. So the rest of the gig title is on you to decide. But you want to make sure that you're using the words, and this really goes for all of the gigs on Fiverr that you create. You want to use the words in your title that your clients are going to be using to find that specific type of offering. So if you think like an author looking for an audiobook narrator, they're going to be using words like record, produce, narrate, audible, ACX, right? Because generally the way that the specific way that audiobooks, the files are formatted, are usually referred to as ACX standard, right? It's a pretty widely used thing. So ACX, Audible, even used Findaway. I was beta testing that and it seems to be working. But audiobook as one word instead of two, narrate and format, because I'm basically addressing a question before it arises in my title. Yes, I know how to also format these files to ACX standard, right? I can narrate it, I can format it to ACX standards for Findaway, whatever. So my title is I will narrate and format your audiobook for ACX, Findaway, and more. Because as we know, there are tons of audiobook distribution companies out there. Again, my gig is in the voiceover category, not the audiobook production category. That's why I recommend you keep it. In terms of all of these other things, fill them out for the languages that you speak, your gender. The purpose of this gig, of course, is going to be audiobook, but I always want to broaden my umbrella or broaden my reach with people searching for me. So I just threw in video narration and e-learning just to see if that would help. But audiobook is what you want to choose, your age range, and then your tone. And just think of the different tones that you might be using in an audiobook. Your preferred genre, if you want to. If you only want to narrate nonfiction, then choose, words like, warm, authoritative, conversational, perhaps. I had just changed these not too long ago. So again, you can change anything in your gig and just sort of see what works better. Again, the only thing you can't change is your username. So you can come in here and try different things and sort of beta test what works better. But these are the ones that I'm testing for now. And now when you get down to your tags, these are the words that are not in your title. They are other words that our clients may be using to find us. Because keep in mind, Fiverr has a search bar, just like Google, where someone's looking for something particular, they're going to put in that search bar, voiceover, audiobook, ebook, publishing, whatever it is that they're looking for. So we want to try to think about those words that they're going to be using and then use them in our tags. Now, the reason that I'm using different words that are not in my title is because when a client does search for something in that search bar, the first thing that's going to be weighted against to find what that person's looking for is a gig title. And then the second thing to narrow down the search is their tags. So you want to be using other keywords that are not in your title. Otherwise, you're just wasting a tag because you're only allowed 5 here. So I have audiobook as 1 word in my title, and then audiobook is 2 words as a search tag. Also, I have voice acting, I have narrator, ACX narrator. Now, I did double dip a little bit here, but again, I'm testing it for now. You can change these tags whenever. You can throw in there voiceover, voice actor, voice acting, audiobook publishing, right? Think of those words. Just test out a few and see how they work. But keep in mind, every time you make a change to your audiobook gig, it resets your place in the algorithm. So if you're in a place where you are seeing some traffic, you're seeing some impressions, you're seeing some clicks, you might even be seeing some orders, don't touch it. Don't touch your gig. Let it ride that wave. Change your gig when you're not seeing any action. You're not seeing any kind of impressions, clicks, nothing. You're not seeing anything for like weeks. Then change it, because what if you have to lose at that point? Reset that algorithm, perhaps with some fresh keywords and some fresh changes, and see what happens. But give it time after you change it. Give it time. There is that natural ebb and flow to Fiverr. They're always moving people around to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity on page 1. So give it some time after you make a change. Don't make a change, then make another change the next day, because you're just, potentially slowing down that skyrocket, that boost of impressions that you could have had that next day. So give it some time before or between changes to your gig. All right. Pricing. Okay. So if you're just creating your audiobook gig, what I recommend to newer narrators is your base gig, just make it simple math, because you're still kind of getting used to how Fiverr works. And when people reach out to you in your inbox and say, I have a script that's 10,000 words, what do you charge? This will just make it easy math for you to be able to answer that question. So again, as I said before, you want that number of words, that 9,300 number of words, as I showed you before, to equal your per finished hour rate. So just for easy math, your base gig, what I recommend is to make this 1,300 words. And then the price, $35. And then each additional 1,300 words is an additional $35. That makes the 9,300 words closer to, I think it's 105. So that makes your per finished hour rate 105. Easy math, right? I'm going to change these back before I forget. And then this one was 900 for 20. It might take a little bit of mathing. If you don't want to use the numbers that I'm suggesting, it'll take a little bit of mathing. So play with the number of words here, the dollar amount, the number of words here, and the dollar amount. And then all you would have to do is save and preview. And then it'll take you to that preview page where you can test out the number of words in the box. So again, just like this, just hit save and preview. And then punch in 9,300 words here and just make sure that that number reflects your per finished hour rate, which what I suggested is about 105 per finished hour, I believe. Now, the other thing you want to be aware of is your days of delivery. This is another thing that I see, because when we're getting started, we see 1,000 words and we go, oh my God, that's going to take me a week to do. In reality, normal rate of speech is about 150 words per minute. So 1,000 words is less than 10 minutes of narration, right? It just sounds like a big number because it is a big number, but in reality, it's less than 10 minutes. So if you think about 2,200 words in 5 days, and that probably sounds like a lot, but then I say each additional 1,800 words is an additional day. So again, it's probably going to take a little bit of mathing, but I would say you want anything up to, if you're just getting started, probably anything up to 50,000, 70,000 words to take you at least 30 days. Because that's a pretty acceptable number for an audiobook when you consider the read through, the manuscript prep, if you do that, then the narration begins, and then the editing, and then the mastering, and then the formatting of the files. It takes time. So 30 days is pretty typical for a book that size. So that's what you want to shoot for. So again, test it out by going to save and preview, making sure that your per finished hour rate is where you want it to be, and that it doesn't say, for 9,300 words that it's going to take you 3 months to do, because a 50,000 word book could take you a year at that rate. So that's definitely going to turn away some clients, and you don't want to do that. So this might take, it'll take a little bit of mathing, but just keep playing with it until it becomes an acceptable per finished hour rate and an acceptable delivery time. Now, the reason that I recommend 1,300 words at $35 is because that $35 price point, that entry point, is pretty darn attractive to people who are price shopping, right? If you're looking for something on Amazon and you see the exact same thing that is $200 versus $20, which one are you going to at least click on and look at? Probably the $20 one, right? It's all about thinking like a salesperson, right? Now, even if the between those two things, the end result is the same, it's just I have a higher probability of being at least clicked on and listened to if I have a lower price point, right? It doesn't mean that they're getting anything less. So, but that still covers you. It still gives you about $35 for, a children's book, which children's books are like 500 words or less usually. So just food for thought. What else? Oh, there's another thing that I get asked a lot. You have all of these upgrades for audiobooks. Now keep in mind that your per finished hour rate covers everything that is included in an audiobook production. So you're not charging extra for split files. You're not charging extra for commercial or for full broadcast rights. It's all included. The only extra things that you could offer are additional revisions, proofing, perhaps a Zoom call with the client. A lot of people want to make sure that the person that they're working with, especially with audiobooks, because it is a larger investment, they want to make sure that they're an actual person, that they're not going to get scammed. And then that way, during the call, you and the author can work out any character voices, their vision for the project, anything else that, may come up. And then, of course, I have my coffee fund, which I attach to all of my gigs. It's sort of like hey, here's a coffee. Thanks for, you're awesome. Have a coffee. Because you know me, I'm a coffeeholic, so. But those are really the only extra things that you should be offering with your audiobook gig. And then you have the requirements. The first top two questions here are Fiverr's internal questions. You can't do anything about those, but you do have the ability to add your own questions. And mine are pretty basic for audiobooks. asking for the final draft of the manuscript, just as a gentle reminder that if you send me the wrong version of the manuscript, the unedited version, and I completely produce the audiobook, then I'm going to have to charge you to re-record the whole thing. It's not a revision. That was an oopsie, and it unfortunately needs to be redone. So I stress the final draft here. And then I also include, please be sure that this is your final draft, as revisions to the manuscript script after the order is started will incur an extra cost, because that's additional work. That's not a revision, right? And then my other question is, where do you plan to upload this? Just so I know what's trending, basically. Where are people going these days? Are they still flocking to ACX? Are they starting to utilize YouTube more for audiobooks? Are they going to find a way? Where are they going? So that question is more or less just for me. But you can add any questions that you want to. Just don't overload them with, questions that, because people just want to get it done. They just want to click through all the boxes and get the order started. So don't overload them with questions either. And then in your gallery, you can put a video in here of you recording, maybe like a behind the scenes kind of a thing, of you recording the audiobook, just to show that you are a real person. I don't have a video in here because they don't sound that great. Fiverr compresses all of the video and audio on their website, because if you can imagine, there's a bajillion bits of data that has to be, held on this server. So they compress everything. So inadvertently, the video doesn't usually sound that great. So I don't use them often, but I do utilize the audio. And then I have a little sample of different kinds of audiobooks in here, so they can hear me narrating different kinds. Children's books, and then fiction, and then a nonfiction is what I have in here. And then, of course, a few images. And then for some reason, these aren't showing up, but I did update these. But I do recommend that, I'm going to have to fix that after this. But I do recommend that you also include PDFs in your gig as well. The more you fill out your gig, the better, not the better, but the more that Fiverr's going to show you off, basically. So that's going to boost your gig a little bit more. Because again, if you think about it from Fiverr's perspective, they spent millions of dollars in advertising trying to get people to come to their site. They don't want to show them people that's got, one or two things on their gig. It doesn't really look committed. It doesn't look finished, right? So you take the opportunity to fill out all of the audio slots, all of the image slots, and then put a couple PDFs in there. And the question I get often is, I'm a voice actor. What PDFs could I be putting in here? Well, let me answer that for you. One PDF could be sort of a CV of the equipment in your studio, right? Just talk about what you have to offer in terms of, professionalism and training, whatever else that you want to include in there. If you have some titles under your belt, list those titles, right? I have this many books on Audible. The other PDF could be a how to place an order, right? There's a lot of new people coming into Fiverr that don't know how to place an order. And if you haven't placed an order on Fiverr yet, I would recommend doing that. Find a service that's $5 and pay for it, just so you understand how the process works. And then you could put a PDF in here detailing how to do that. Input the total number of words of your manuscript into the word count calculator. It'll give you an estimate. Add any other extras that you want to use. Place order. I get started. Reach out to you with questions, so on and so forth. Just a step-by-step how to place an order. That's a good idea for a PDF. And then save it. Make sure you save it, because it doesn't auto-save. And then preview it, and then test out all of the functions. Make sure that the word count calculator equals your per finished hour rate, that the delivery time looks right, so on and so forth. I think I covered everything. But if you guys have questions about anything that I discussed, then please let me know. But let's go over to the comments and see what we got.